You're surrounded. Every road in is cut. Every supply route is gone. The enemy isn't attacking. They're waiting. And every day that passes, your position gets weaker while theirs stays the same. This is a siege, and it doesn't end until one side breaks. So how does a siege actually work? We're going to break that down. How attackers seal off a position, how defenders survive, and how sieges actually end. The core problem. A siege is a war of attrition disguised as a standoff. The attacker's goal isn't to storm the walls on day one. It's to make holding out more painful than surrendering. Time is the attacker's primary weapon. Food runs out. Water runs low. Ammunition depletes. Morale collapses. The longer the siege runs, the weaker the defender becomes, without the attacker losing a single soldier. This is why sieges have decided the outcome of wars throughout history and why they still appear on modern battlefields today. Bakhmut, Mariupol, Mosul. The mechanics are the same whether the walls are stone or reinforced concrete. Surround, starve, and break. The attacker needs to solve one problem before anything else. Encirclement. A siege that isn't complete isn't a siege. It's a partial blockade. As long as one road, one supply corridor, one air route remains open, the defender can resupply, reinforce, and hold indefinitely. Complete encirclement is non-negotiable. How attackers seal the position. Encirclement happens in phases. First, the attacker cuts the major routes. Roads, railways, river crossings. Then they push forward to eliminate the gaps between their own positions. Finally, they establish a continuous line around the entire target, with overlapping fields of fire so nothing moves in or out undetected. This line is called the circumvallation. It faces inward toward the defender. But a smart attacker builds a second line facing outward called the contravallation. This protects the besieging force from a relief army arriving from outside. Now, the attacker is simultaneously keeping the defender in and keeping reinforcements out. Once the encirclement is complete, the attacker has 3 tools to break the defense. Tool 1, starvation. Cut the food supply and wait. A garrison that entered the siege with 30 days of rations has 30 days before the situation becomes critical. Defenders begin rationing immediately, but rationing only delays the inevitable. Starvation degrades fighting capability fast. Weak soldiers make mistakes. Morale collapses under hunger faster than under fire. Tool 2, bombardment. Artillery, mortars, and in modern contexts, missiles and drones continuously strike defensive positions, supply storage, command posts, and civilian infrastructure. The goal isn't always immediate destruction, it's exhaustion. Defenders forced to repair damage, rotate positions, and operate under constant threat make errors. Bombardment also sends a psychological message. We can do this forever. Can you? Tool 3, direct assault. The most expensive option and used selectively. Attackers identify the weakest point in the perimeter, concentrate combat power, and breach. Historically, this meant undermining walls, battering rams, and siege towers. Today, it means armor, breaching charges, and close air support. A successful breach forces the defender to fight on 2 fronts simultaneously, inside and outside the perimeter, which splits their already depleted forces. How defenders survive. The defender's entire strategy is built around one objective: outlast the attacker long enough for a relief force to arrive, or for the political cost of the siege to become unsustainable. This requires ruthless prioritization from day one. Ration immediately. Not when supplies get low. Immediately. Every commander who waited too long to implement rationing shortened their garrison's survival window unnecessarily. Calculate total supplies on day one and establish strict daily allocations that extend those supplies as far as possible. Maintain sortie capability. A defender who sits passively behind their walls hands the attacker complete initiative. Sorties, offensive raids, launched from inside the perimeter, serve multiple purposes. They destroy siege equipment, disrupt attacker supply lines, gather intelligence, and most critically, they maintain the fighting spirit of the garrison. A force that only receives punishment eventually stops believing it can win. Protect water. Food can be rationed severely. Water cannot. Contaminated water sources have ended sieges faster than starvation in countless historical examples. Defenders must identify, protect, and if necessary, purify every water source inside the perimeter from day one. Control information. Morale inside a siege is fragile. Rumours of a failed relief force or inflated casualty figures can collapse a garrison's will to resist faster than any physical deprivation. Information discipline is as important as ammunition discipline. Use the terrain. Every building, every wall, every rubble pile inside the perimeter is a defensive position. Defenders prepare fallback positions inside the perimeter so that even if the outer wall is breached, the attacker faces another prepared defense line inside. A siege that turns into urban combat after a breach costs the attacker enormous casualties and time. How sieges end. There are only 4 ways a siege ends. Surrender. The defender's supplies, morale, or combat capability collapse below the point of effective resistance. Negotiated surrender preserves the garrison's lives. Unconditional surrender after prolonged resistance rarely ends well for the defenders. Relief. An external force breaks through the circumvallation and re-establishes contact with the garrison. This is the outcome every defender is fighting to survive long enough to see. The relief of Bastogne in 1944 is the cleanest modern example. Hold long enough and help arrives. Breakout. The garrison attempts to fight through the encirclement and escape. This is a last resort and carries enormous risk. A weakened, depleted force attempting to breach a prepared defensive line has poor odds. But a controlled breakout is preferable to slow annihilation. Attacker withdrawal. The political or military cost of maintaining the siege becomes unsustainable. Supply lines stretch. Troops tied down in siege operations cannot be used elsewhere. International pressure mounts. Sometimes the attacker simply cannot afford to keep waiting and withdraws. This is the outcome defenders aim to engineer by making the siege as expensive as possible for the attacker. Why sieges? Fail attackers lose sieges by underestimating the defenders' supplies, allowing relief forces to break the encirclement, or overextending their own logistics. A besieging army that runs out of food before the garrison does has lost. Defenders lose sieges by failing to ration early enough, neglecting sortie operations, losing control of their water supply, or allowing morale to collapse before physical supplies run out. The most common failure is psychological. Defenders who stop believing a relief force is coming stop fighting effectively well before their supplies are exhausted. Sieges look like patience. They aren't. They are a precise calculation of time, supply, and will. The side that manages those 3 variables better wins. Every modern encirclement from Mariupol to Mosul follows the same logic as every siege in history. Surround, starve, and break. Or hold, ration, and wait. That's how sieges actually work.